South Korea has successfully tested a submarine-launched ballistic missile, becoming the seventh country in the world to develop a homegrown model. Seoul's defense ministry said Wednesday that the country has been testing a range of new missiles, including the SLBM, and that a long-range air-launched missile, which would be used for South Korea's state-of-the-art fighter jet Ka-21, had successfully passed an aircraft separation test. The president was there, and his office says that these weapons will help boost South Korea's self-defense as well as establish peace on the Korean peninsula. And of course, this announcement came just hours after North Korea fired 2 missiles into the East Sea on Wednesday following weeks of threats made against the South Korea-US alliance. We discussed the latest developments today with retired Lieutenant General and former Special Warfare Commander of the South Korean Army, Tonenbaum. We also connect with Jenny Town, Senior Fellow of the Stimson Center and Director of the Center's 38 North program, which provides policy and technical analysis on North Korea. Very warm welcome to you both. Welcome back on the show. It's great to see you today. Thank you. Thank you. South Korea tests new ballistic missiles. And well, General Chan, we're hearing a lot of news coming out of North Korea. But first, let's talk about South Korea becoming the seventh country in the world to successfully test its own SLBM on Wednesday, and also the aircraft separation of their long-range missiles that will be mounted on its state-of-the-art fighter jet. How significant are these achievements in weapons development? This is pretty significant, and it's good news for the military because it gives us greater survivability as well as lethality in our weapon systems. But there's also some misleading information going out, and I say this because the SLBM that we have developed as the seventh country, or the prior 6 countries, have nuclear warheads on their SLBMs, while South Koreans have no intent of doing this, and yet we have developed this capability. South Koreans are the first country with a non-nuclear capability that has opted to develop this capability, so I think there could be a misunderstanding by people thinking that in the end South Korea intends on using this as a nuclear weapon, which I believe is out of the question. And if this is out of the question, in the end we're going to get 50 missiles for $1 billion that we could easily get for $100 million if they were deployed on the ground. So although it gives us a second strike capability, it's not that much, and so the logical conclusion is that it will be a waste of a lot of resources and money. So I think that's a bad news on this side for the SLBM. The long-range air-to-ground missile system again will provide us with better lethality and survivability. Hopefully, it will be able to be used as a deterrent against a North Korean strike. Well, even with a bad news element, can South Korea still develop missiles? Is that still? Can we still expect more from South Korea's missile development after the U.S. ended its limit restriction on South Korea from developing such weapons? Yes, probably so, because it is a very important part of the deterrent against North Korea. But unfortunately, the fact of the matter is that no matter how many conventional warheads you have in missiles of all types, it still will not be in parity with the North Korean nuclear capabilities. So the alliance with the United States, which provides us with extended deterrence, is more important than ever before. Now, Miss Town, how will North Korea respond? Kim Yo-jong, the sister of North Korea's leader, she reacted to South Korea's SLBM when she criticized that, saying that it could cause inter-Korean relations to break down. And her reaction came actually quite quickly, just 4 hours after Seoul revealed that it has a new ballistic missile capability. Do you think the North was taken by surprise, and do you think it would take? How do you think it would further respond? Would it give a bigger show of force, or would it finally talk about dialogue? I don't think they were taken by surprise, and you know, South Korea has talked about building an SLBM capability. And I think this is also one of the reasons why North Korea has shown 2 new SLBMs over the past 2 military parades as well. In terms of where this is going, I think, you know, with Kim Yo-jong talking about ballistic missiles, I think that there's, none of this is a surprise, and I think part of the response is going to be with South Korea actively testing ballistic missiles. It sort of greenlights the North Koreans to continue testing ballistic missiles as well. And I think it will be very difficult to get the North Koreans to agree in the future to another moratorium on ballistic missile testing without some kind of concessions on the South Korean side as well. What does the railroad system mean? And this time, well over the weekend, they claimed that they successfully tested new long-range increased missiles, possibly with nuclear capabilities. And just a few hours ago, they said that this was launched from a railway system. What do you think the North's intentions were in showcasing its successes, and what does a railroad system really mean? Well, I think, You know, the way that they described the rail launch system was really a proof of concept of something that they could do in the future. And I think, in practical terms, it does give them a sort of workaround to sanctions. It's a sanctions mitigation effort, right? If they can't get the components and parts that they need for transport to erect the launches or TELs, this is one way that they can continue to build diversity within their ballistic missile portfolio. And I think that's a lot of what we're seeing over the past few launches that they've done and the tests that they've done in the past couple of years, is really emphasizing this diversity of their arsenals and different ways in which they can pose a threat, ballistic plus cruise missile threat, to the U.S.ROK alliance. All right, and General, so Wednesdays, what do you think of this development, launched by North Korea? There are 2 ballistic missiles that were shot into the East Sea. They said it was shot by using a railway ballistic missile system. What do you think of this development? Well, the railway system is an old concept that derived from the mid-80s from the Soviet Union, as well as tinkered with by the United States. So these countries have vast territories where they could put missiles into a train and keep it constantly moving, making a static weapon system now into a mobile system. I think that's where the North Koreans got their idea, and I agree with Dr. Town's assessment of the pros of this kind of option. But I still feel that although it is a new kind of capability for North Korea, that we will be able to counter this much more easily than other kinds of threats. And General, what did you think about the timing? What did you think about the timing of South Korea's SRBM launch, or the announcement that it had successfully tested a launch, as it did come after North Korea's ballistic missile test over the weekend, and also Chinese Foreign Minister Wang's trip to Seoul? I mean, is there much to read into this? I don't think so, because we planned this way ahead. The date was planned way ahead of any of these events. So I think it was a coincidence that the North Koreans fired their weapon systems just prior to this. But I think what the South Koreans did, despite the North Korean provocation and the visit by the foreign minister to China, is that it shows that self-defense is precedence over all matters, that we will and we should always have the right to self-defend ourselves. And this was a good initiative by the Moon government to show the resolve of the Korean people that we will defend ourselves and we will continue to improve our capabilities. North Korea's ballistic missile launches. Directs tell now, North Korea's ballistic missile launches. The timing of their launch was quite unfortunate, as we have key anniversaries of the 2 Koreas over the weekend, the signing of the Pyongyang Declaration and the Comprehensive Military Agreement, both signed in 2018. And well, under the Pyongyang Declaration, the North expressed its willingness to permanently dismantle nuclear facilities in Yongbyon. But the UN's Atomic Agency has recently detected that there were signs of North Korea's nuclear reactor in Yongbyon being online again. How advanced and active is their nuclear program at the moment? Well, the reality is that North Korea never stopped producing fissile material, even while negotiations were ongoing. Even if they weren't producing plutonium, their uranium enrichment program was active during that time. It is unfortunate to see that the 5-megawatt reactor has most likely been restarted, and this is a critical component to North Korea's nuclear weapons program. If they want to pursue thermonuclear weapons, if they want to pursue and advance their miniaturization capabilities, they will need plutonium as part of that process. I think it shows one of the real missed opportunities during the Hanoi summit of getting Yongbyon off the table and really being able to stop and freeze that nuclear weapons arsenal production in its tracks. So, I think all of these signs are really in line with the goals that Kim Jong-un set out in January at the 8-Party Congress about how they plan to move forward with their nuclear and ballistic missile testing, and I think we'll probably see a lot more of this in the coming weeks and months. Lack of response from North Korea, and also Direct Sam. Why do you think there's been such reluctance or a lack of response from the North despite your envoy for North Korean affairs, Sung Kim, having repeatedly extended an invitation to talk anytime and anywhere? And as for the U.S., do you think it's slowly slipping back into the strategic patience mode? Well, I think, it slips into strategic patience by default if it's not willing to be forward-looking at the beginning of the process and be a little bit more transactional at the beginning of the process. I think the North Koreans are in no rush to come back to negotiations. The fear of Hanoi was a very big political failure for Kim Jong-un to have gone through these high-profile summits and come away with basically nothing tangible to show for his efforts. I think they are going to be much more reluctant going forward to try that again, and especially at a time when there's political and economic turmoil inside North Korea. I think the last thing he wants is a political failure to add into all the other things that are not going well inside the country. So this notion of the U.S. being willing to meet anytime, anywhere, while that's a good message, it doesn't give any indication that if you come back that, there's something concrete that you can get from this, that there's some concrete offer on the table. And I think the U.S. would be much more compelling if they did actually put forward an initial offer to say that this is what we would like to see, this is what we would give in response, and give something for the North Koreans concrete to react to, but also build the expectation that short-term outcomes are actually possible. Conclusion. Well, President Moon Jae-in here in South Korea has been continuously trying to advance inter-Korean relations and also get U.S.-North Korea dialogue back on the table. But General, now the two Koreas, they signed the Comprehensive Military Agreement back in 2018 to diffuse military tensions along one of the most tightly guarded borders in the world. And while looking back on this agreement, has it led to any significant progress, and should there be efforts to further preserve it? Yeah. So critics of the CMA say that we gave too much and gained very little. Supporters of the CMA contend that the CMA has brought stability along the DMZ and especially along the NLL, the Northern Limit Line, which is partially true. I agree with both views. But I must also point out that although it was a worthwhile effort to proceed with the peace initiatives that the South Koreans had wanted, that for the past couple of years that the CMA has been active, we have not seen any real outcomes. That the North Koreans have avoided working with South Korea and, in fact, have made some outlandish demands citing the CMA. I feel that maintaining the CMA is worthwhile, but at the same time, North Korea really needs to understand that we must build trust and that their actions are not doing so. So unfortunately, I feel that the CMA is in peril if the North Koreans continue on this track of thinking and actions. Well, I'm afraid to use the time. That's where we'll have to leave it for today. That was Tony Baum, retired Lieutenant General of the Republic of Korea Army, and Jenny Town, Senior Fellow and Director of Stimson Center and the 38 North Program. Thank you both so much for your time today. Thank you. And to our viewers, as always, thank you very much for watching. Core.